Now, for many years, what did we think? We thought, well, that number would go down and down and down and down. Now, I don't know about you, but me, when that report came out, just how many partakers? And what were we thinking? Well, probably, maybe we didn't say it, but we were thinking, the number will go down, 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 and there'll be just a couple of old guys in a wheelchair who will get their reward.
I'm not gonna lie, that was
Well,
actually
I'm exaggerating,
funny.
but that was sort of the feeling, wasn't it? But now, what have we seen in recent years? Those numbers have gone up and up. And not only that, younger brothers have been appointed on the governing body. Now, I know what you're all thinking. 2 new ones, how old are they? We know. You're not Googling now, but you will be. But you see, we need to be careful about what we're thinking with regard to the number of anointed ones left on earth. You see, 19 years ago, I was appointed on the governing body. Even I thought I was too young. Now they tell me I'm not so young anymore. But do we see the point? What does the Bible actually tell us with regard to this? Well, it doesn't say the number would just dwindle down to just having a few older ones left. No, the great crowd of other sheep will be judged on the basis of how they deal with Christ's brothers. So that means the faithful and discreet slave, as well as all the anointed throughout the earth, will continue to be active in doing the work and wanting and needing your support, right up until the time that suddenly they will be reassigned. And isn't that what Matthew 24, verse 31 says? There'll be a gathering, the final gathering of the anointed from all different parts of the earth. So for us to think, well, there's some new ones on the governing body, they don't look too old. Maybe we've got a little bit extra time. No. Jehovah is making sure that the faithful and discreet slave is continuing to work and is effective right up until that time of reassignment.
It's also noticeable that he speaks about the anointed and the faithful and discreet slave interchangeably, almost as though the 2012 new light never happened. I find that Geoffrey Jackson, when he's giving these talks about Bible prophecy and new light, he almost seems to treat the whole thing like it's a stand-up routine. And I find that quite irritating, to be honest, because this is all supposed to be life or death. This is all about understanding the Bible and making it through Armageddon and taking seriously the teachings of the faithful slave. And so for him to just be kind of making these jokes and deliberately eliciting laughter from the audience, it kind of makes me wonder how seriously he's taking it.
I don't 100%, I understand where Lloyd's coming from with the whole seriousness of it's life or death, because it is true. The average Jehovah's Witness, when they lose a family member, they actually show little to no emotion. That is, that they feel bad about it. That they care about it, or that it hurts them. No, actually, reality is almost all of them are not even neutral. They're glowing. They're beaming with joy. They're all so joy-filled and so happy and excited and energized and motivated, and they full of love all of a sudden because, well, we'll get to see them in paradise. And they'll all be perfect again. And young. Wouldn't that be great? Which is one of the most disturbing and irritating aspects of witnesses to me, of JWs to me, is exactly that just complete aloofness and casting out and well, it's not a bad thing. It's a great thing that they died. And in order to use a more human term that's not necessarily connected to them, they sometimes will use the qualifying caveat of, oh, well, they're not suffering anymore. As if it makes it better. Whatever your feelings are towards that. it's important to acknowledge that, because then at that point, with the jokes that Mark Sanders, or sorry, not Mark Sanderson, Jeffrey Geoffrey Jackson over here is consistently doing. Like, this is his MO whenever he's doing these kinds of things. And then everybody laughing. It is genuinely something that I feel like isn't that big of a deal if you're a devout Jehovah's Witness, which if you're at one of these meetings or you're watching it, you probably are. So then at that point, I don't really feel like Lloyd is that quite, like, I don't feel like that feeling or reaction of his is quite correct. I feel like it's like, okay, well, this is actually just kind of up their alley. This is just kind of how Jehovah's Witnesses work.
Second subject we'd like to talk about is our view with regard to the start of the Great Tribulation, with the destruction of Babylon the Great. When we look through the scriptures, in Revelation chapter 16, what does it tell us? That the waters would gradually dry up. Yes, churches are losing support in some countries, for example, Europe. It wasn't that long ago that most nations in Europe were very religious, but now people are turning their backs on religion. But at the same time, when we look at Africa and South America, we see that religion still has a strong influence. So now, what could be that little voice in our mind saying, well, yeah, we see it's going in the right direction, but maybe not just yet. We've got a little bit more time left. But again, we need to remember what the scriptures tell us. And if you'd turn with me this time, please, to Revelation chapter 17. This is one of the chapters that describes the destruction of false religion, or in other words, when the Great Tribulation starts. So let's read Revelation 17 and verse 17, and note, please, what it tells us. For God put it into their hearts to carry out his thought, yes, to carry out their one thought by giving their kingdom to the wild beast until the words of God will have been accomplished. Now, what is this one thought? Well, up to now, we've said the one thought is their desire to turn on false religion. And we can understand that because the context is talking about the destruction of false religion. But you see, if you look back at that verse, what is the one thought? Now, this means we have to adjust our understanding, another change. What does it say? The one thought refers to the nations being willing to hand over power, their political power, to the scarlet-colored wild beast, the United Nations.
Oh, right. Okay, this is something that bugs me, and it really irritates me, because there's a lot of people that are going to see this or hear this and be like, okay, fair. Like, a lot of people hate the UN around the world right now because of the fact that it's underfunded. It has been for a long time. It's always been a joke, but it's way more of a joke than it's ever been now because they don't have any money, and money is power. So therefore, bleh. And then the EU is like the takeover, and /WEF is like a total takeover of that and all other governmental systems, and even religions technically at this point. But the part that they won't talk about is the fact that the Jehovah's Witnesses, the governing body, the Watchtower and Tract Society, whatever you want to call it, quite literally is a part of the UN. They're like ambassadors to the UN, whether it's ironically the human rights aspect, or in department, or there's like 2, 3, I think actually no, I think there's 4 or 5 different like branches of the United Nations, the UN, that the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower and Tract Society, so the governing body, whatever you want to look at it as, whatever branding you want to use, literally advises on. They are a part of the council. Even if they don't consider themselves officially to be, they are. They are literally a part of the deciding factors. They are a part of the decision making. They are part of the debates. They are part of the communications. They are part of everything with it. They have impact and influence directly on where they go with things. Yet at the same time, for the longest time, they've been insisting this. Not as much as they are now, where they're front-facing now, saying, "Oh, well, it's not actually the people abandoning religion, of course, false religion." No, 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 no. It's actually the United Nations and giving power to them. Literally, if you look around the world, by the way, at the current time, people are talking about taking away power from the United Nations even more and just shutting it down, getting rid of it completely. Like, that's the global standpoint on the UN at this point, is that, especially if you look at the average people, there's no reason for the UN to exist almost anymore, because it's just a fucking joke, and there's no real funding, and nobody really wants to fund it because it's a joke, and it's really just a tool for powerful politicians and corporations and stuff to toy with and manipulate. So, like, obviously, it's the opposite of what they're saying now. But even throughout history, before Face First, they, to the rest of the world and to their own members, they were trying to stomp out the rumors and everything as any association with their doctrine of themselves or anything with the United Nations, because that was a long-standing thing, because people did their snooping, they did their investigations, they paid attention to the UN enough that they saw their connections, they saw that they're directly involved with all these different things, and that they, even to this day, still are, and yet, you know, they're trying to like, no, 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 we hate the United Nations. The United Nations is part of Satan and his demons and their plans. And, you know, we would never have anything to do with them. That's horrible. And then eventually, I think it was around Y2K, so like 2000, that they publicly came out and were like, oh, well, no, we've disassociated ourselves. We've pulled out. So they indirectly admitted that they were. In other words, that they also, therefore, were lying all those decades. And now they're like, okay, well, then, in 2000, they're like, okay, fine. Yes, we were, without actually saying that, because it's indirect, because they're just simply saying we've removed ourselves in you know, departed association with the United Nations. We don't do anything with them anymore. And again, like I said, people have been able to quickly prove that to this day they are, in fact, arguably now more than ever, they're more involved directly with the United Nations and their decision makings, especially for some weird reason on the human rights aspect of it. It's the strangest thing. It's like 4 or 5 different branches of the UN they're involved with directly. And that has to be pointed out, because they're trying at the same time trying to act like, oh, we're anti-UN, and that, oh, the UN is the, I guess apparently they're equivalent, the mark of the wild beast. It is the wild beast. It is Satan, his demons. It is the worst thing ever. You're giving your power and your rights and your freedoms to this organization. Actually, people are giving it to the WEF and the EU, but mainly WEF, not technically, therefore, actually, a branch of the United Nations is the World Health Organization, WHO. So actually, technically, I guess you are doing that. People are doing that happily, but they're fucking dumb. But at the same time, it's like people want to kill it off at the same time. It's swapped. They've swapped hats basically, and now it's like, oh, WEF. It's all associated. It's just really frustrating for me. But again, the point is that it needs to be mentioned that, yes, the Jehovah's Witnesses claim that they're anti-UN and they hate everything about it, and apparently now it's demonic. But that's a lie, because if that was true and they really felt that way and believed it, they would have no association with them. But they do. A lot. And influence and thus power in the UN as well. Let that sink in. That's a fun-ass fact, isn't it? That should probably make you irritated, if not maybe even a little pissed off, because what the fuck is this shit?
All they need to do is read the Bible in context. And suddenly they can unlock this treasure trove of new understandings, of adjustments in their understandings regarding Bible prophecy. Seriously. How are we supposed to respect this?
Yeah.
How are we supposed to look at the governing body and see God's channel of communication? It's not a very efficient channel, is it? So it's taken all the way up to 2024 for them to come to a new understanding as to the one thought. It's no longer about the nations turning on Babylon the Great or false religion, or essentially any religion that isn't Jehovah's Witnesses. It's now supposedly to do with the nations giving their power to, as we're going to see, the United Nations. So that's the change. That's the big deal. Geoffrey Jackson seems to be the governing body member who gets to do these big reveals, especially when it comes to Armageddon and the Great Tribulation.
The 10 horns that you saw mean 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they do receive authority as kings for 1 hour with the wild beast. These have one thought, so they give their power and authority to the wild beast.
That's a weird excess detail that seems extremely arbitrary and random, like just completely pulled out of thin air. Like, here, 1 hour, 10 kings. How do you get it? Even if you did do it contextually, how do you read what he read? Short ass, like maybe a couple of sentences, that's it. A passage. And you get that. All of that. All of this in grave, clear detail. When nothing in it actually rationally suggests anything like close to any of this. What? And of course, you know, the 10 kings gave their 1 hour of time to the red wild beast being Satan as demons, you know, in the back of a Walmart parking lot in Camden, New Jersey, obviously. I mean, come on. You can't forget that detail.
Up to now, we've assumed these 10 kings, which represent all the political powers and governments in the world at the moment, that they did this during the last days by supporting, first of all, the League of Nations and then the United Nations. But now, what do we understand this to be? Seeing we understand verse 17. Well, there will come a time when all political powers on earth, which includes many who have never been part of the 7 world powers, they will see that they need to collectively pool their power by giving it to the United Nations to try and solve some of the problems in the world. And they will rule, notice, what does it say, for 1 hour, just a short period of time. So this newly empowered United Nations, from that time on, will rule collectively for a short time, but it will enable them to destroy false religion and fight against Jesus and Jehovah's people. Now, isn't that exciting?
Yeah, it's absolutely thrilling. So apologies if you do actually find this intensely boring, but I have to cover this because this is new light. This is a new understanding that they've come up with. They've now decided that when the 10 kings give over their power, they're not doing it in the past, as was the previous understanding to the League of Nations. This is all something that's going to happen in the future. It's not just about the establishment of the League of Nations and the United Nations. It's a specific giving away or ceding of sovereignty to the United Nations so that the United Nations has the clout it needs to destroy false religion and then turn on Jehovah's Witnesses, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses believe is going to happen just before Armageddon.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So, what? Okay, so the whole thing they're trying to claim, is that apparently the United Nations, basically the providers of Armageddon, wants everybody, the 10 kings, holding over their power to them for 1 hour. They're going to destroy all the false religion on earth. And then they're going to savor, leaving the best for last, which is the Jehovah's Witnesses. They'll come after them. After. And they'll destroy them too. What? That's what I'm gathering from what Lloyd said. I have no idea if that's actually what he means or what he's saying. But that's what I gather from that. Which there's so many different angles and ways you could start by explaining how that makes absolutely no fucking sense and how it's actually also very contradictory and hypocritical. Because huh? So you're using it to defend your whole Armageddon thing of like, oh, it's going to be the end times and the UN giving the power to them for the 1 hour. That's going to somehow give them the ability to destroy all false religion, which you would think would be a good thing because that's good. Well, the beginning of Armageddon, right? That's one of the first things they're supposed to do is to completely destroy all the false religions or whatever. Blah, blah, blah. So then at that point, this is so hard to fathom. Like, almost finding it hard to put into words, despite how simple it is. Because I'm trying to rationalize it, and it's impossible to make logical, rational sense with it. Because it just doesn't work. So I'm having a challenge just putting it into those words, just simple words. This is genuinely overwhelming. Like, it's overloading my brain and its processing abilities. Because my brain just naturally has to analyze and figure everything out, and if it can't do it, it just gets stuck. And then I can't do the other thing. It takes too much power, and then I can't fucking finish what I'm trying to say or think. And it's like, oh my god, that's basically what's happening right now to me. It's like, what the? It doesn't fucking make sense. What? Because yeah, again, that would indicate you think it'd be a good thing to the Jehovah's Witnesses. That it's like, okay, good, because then they're the ones who you would think would be associated with Jesus or whatever, Jehovah himself, Jehovah, because he's killing off all the false religions and all the false religion believers and everything. A good riddance, right? Yeah, they're all destroyed and destructed, right? Because that's the big thing. They love using the term destroyed, destructed. You could also use annihilated, eviscerated, obliterated. So there's so many different rhyming words for the same things. It's incredible. I actually love it. Love to just randomly immediately start reciting each of them. Anyway, but yeah, so you think because of that, then that would indicate that, and then therefore, again, if you were the one true religion as you claim, then why would if because again, like, why would they destroy all the false religions and therefore not you if it's Satan and his demons doing that work and doing Armageddon? Like, what? But no, you have to be destroyed too in order for your prophecy to be correct. In order to be resurrected, you also have to be offed, so then you can be resurrected back to life again. Can you see how this doesn't fucking compute? Because then, so they're doing the bidding of Jehovah, of Jehovah, whatever you want to call him. And Jesus, apparently, just a random lowly carpenter from the Middle East, and by destroying all the false religions. Not destroying the Jehovah's Witnesses until best for last, apparently. And then it'll destroy them too. And that's it. And now your prophecy is going to guarantee, it proves that it's going to happen. And now you're going to be resurrected and you're going to be put back to purpose. But only Jehovah's Witnesses. Because the UN, which is apparently Satan, does exactly what... It just doesn't compute. It's so... to me. Because I'm like, I want it to compute and I can't. You can't make something that makes no fucking sense compute. But goddamn, it doesn't make me want to figure it out. Like, I just wanted to like go down the dumbass pit and just like dive into that endless wormhole and try to figure out in what way could a stupid idiot rationalize this and make it make sense. Like, what did they cherry pick? What did they pluck? What straws did they grasp at to make this somehow work in their heads? I can never understand it because, like, I don't know if I'm capable of going that low and that low down on the fucking intelligence spectrum, but apparently,
forth from the wisdom of the governing body, but it is nonetheless worth registering and hopefully explaining for you. And ultimately, all of this is designed to increase the anticipation of Jehovah's Witnesses regarding Armageddon, to keep them on tenterhooks and in this constant state of readiness. And we're going to see that especially in Geoffrey Jackson's concluding remarks.
So what have we learned in our discussion? Well, yes, some things change gradually. But brothers and sisters, remember, there are some sudden things that are about to occur. Let's remember the two things as a reminder. First of all,
I also want to point this out, okay? If you pay attention to when Geoffrey Jackson starts shouting, it's at the points where in history, dictators have done the same thing, or people who are trying to become totalitarian people, like Hitler. I always use this example because Hitler is like the most modern, perfect example of this, where repetition, repeat, but always increase your emphasis. Keep adding more and more dramatic emphasis to everything you say. So eventually you're quite literally shouting, which is one of the things that Adolf was so famous for, right? In his supposed speeches and everything. He would literally fucking shout, practically scream and give himself an aneurysm like an Alex Jones figure, you know, while he's up there on his fucking podium or stage or whatever, giving these impassioned fucking speeches. But also, he was really just repeating himself and getting more and more dramatically emphasized. I wonder if that's like their intention with Geoffrey, is they want him to be that guy, that figure, to prey on that basic, easy manipulated piece of human psychology, where it is a key player in causing fear mongering and actually successfully continuing the fear mongering cycle. To gain more control and power over people, because obviously the more fearful people are, the more they shut down. Your body can only handle so much stimuli, so naturally they start to shut down, especially considering if they're not allowed to think for themselves and they are supposed to just blindly trust in, oh, Armageddon's going to come and that's a good thing for us because then even though we'll die, we'll be immediately resurrected because obviously we're good, obedient, faithful, and discreet slaves. It's just basic human psychology that's being preyed on by these assholes. Ironically, quite literally, sheep in wolves' clothing, or rather, wolves in sheep's clothing. Sorry, I'm dyslexic. So, yeah. And I have a feeling, maybe it's even intuition, because it's pretty intense. It's probably intuition that, like, that's exactly what the purpose of Geoffrey Jackson doing this is, and that's why he waits until near the end with the more core and potentially fear-mongering points of like, you will fucking die. Mark my words. But it's a good thing. But you're gonna die.
The remaining anointed ones will suddenly be taken to heaven while they are still very active. The second one, Jehovah will suddenly move the nations to give their political power to the United Nations. So what's the takeaway? Don't be complacent. Don't think, oh, this is going to gradually change. No, some things won't gradually change. They will occur suddenly as acts of God. So be ready and don't be surprised by sudden change.
I was right. I was fucking right. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, that's why this part he shouted the most. Because think about it. That's the one that's going to be the most heavy on the fear mongering. That's going to cause the most fear. That's going to cause the most everything else. And plus, it's also under the guise of being almost charitable or altruistic about it, right? This is the right, good-hearted faith thing to do. This is what Jehovah God wants you to do. So don't question it, just do it. But make sure you're not doing what I'm doing. Do it like Mark, or I keep want to call him Mark Sanderson. Jeffrey Epstein. Fuck it, I'm going to call him Jeffrey Epstein. My brain just wants me to call him that. Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey the Toys R Us giraffe over here. I'm kidding, he's a Feivel rat. Is doing.
And it is, just to be candid for a moment, quite noticeable just how much Geoffrey Jackson is yelling at his audience throughout this talk, but especially there at the end. He starts off his talk with almost a stand-up routine, talking about essentially how silly the expectations of Jehovah's Witnesses were regarding the anointed, and those were expectations that were specifically based on teachings that were given to them by the governing body at that time, due to the generation teaching, due to the belief that the generation that witnessed the events of 1914, the generation of anointed Christians, would not pass away before Armageddon. So making light of it and joking about it is itself, I would say, quite tone deaf and quite inappropriate.
It's an expert way to manipulate people, though. Again, it's like people who say stardom early, right? Stardom early. They're referring to kids, parents to kids, school teachers to kids, educational system to kids, doctors to kids, politicians to kids, you name it. Religions to kids, actually. Stardom early, because you're going to have a way easier time convincing them of things and getting them to be well indoctrinated the earlier you start them. That's why you have re-education places, and more autocratic places and nations throughout world history have always tried to have their own fully controlled school systems and doctrines, to where those school systems only taught what would benefit them, the people in power. So naturally, I could point to myself, like, it wouldn't make more sense to do this, but I did this. Interesting. I wonder what that feels kind of weird now that I'm realizing I'm doing that. Oh well, what anyway. And so the whole point is to basically gain as much power and control over people as possible. This is why this basic human psychology tactic is the way it is. He's intentionally being as almost a stand-up comedian at the start, because he's getting you started early. He's reeling them in. That's another thing you'll hear, like I say in show business. Reel them in. What you're doing is you're doing your good faith, happy-go-lucky comedy, high energy, open arms, so to speak, kind of welcoming of people, and kind of like welcoming them in, ushering them into you. And then once you got them by the fucking balls, as George Carlin would say, you twist them off and you crush them, and their hands right in front of their eyes. Because that's the fear-mongering aspect at that point. And the dramatic emphasis and the repetition. Because once you have them by the balls, they're fucked. They're already in too deep. So they're probably going to believe just about anything you say. And even if they don't believe it, they'll still probably do it out of fear that there'll be potentially violent, vicious repercussions for it. And they don't want to risk that. So naturally, they're going to become almost like a Stockholm Syndrome victim, where they're just going to be like, well, I'd rather pretend that it's not actually why I'm really doing this than it is, because it's safer for my family or my friends or myself, or all the above, or some other combination. And so that's exactly why he would have done the whole comedy stuff in the beginning, because he's keeping it lighthearted, giving you your muffins, so to speak, before he officially starts to gradually increase the intensity until he's literally yelling at you at the end with almost weirdly underlying calm demeanor to it, which is in basic human psychology considered something that is very authoritative. So in other words, it's something where it's like, this person knows what they're talking about, and they're confident, very confident. So as a result, they have like this weird undertone and under energy feeling of being very calm and collected while they're still yelling at you, because with emphasis, because like that's the whole point. They split it in two so that way your brain has a hard time differentiating them or picking out that, oh, so that's what you're doing, because that's the point. You're not supposed to think, you're just supposed to believe. It's just basic human psychology in a nutshell. So that's why he did that. It's very intentional. Again, just like Mark probably has a specific reason why he gives certain talks versus any of the others, and he'll talk about certain things versus any of the others, and he's the one who will carry himself and speak actually to people in a certain way versus, say, Geoffrey Jackson here, or Stephen Lett, or anybody else. They have, you can tell there's like almost a tiered system where like they have a specific like role to play, almost like they're actors. They have a specific set of lines, a specific set of scripts, a specific character they play, and they are to adhere to the scripts and those characters and be that character for the JW broadcasting stuff and the talks and anything else like that, to make a place. I don't know if it's like because of the fact that like they literally are hand selecting these people and being like, okay, you're perfect for this role and this set of scripts. You're perfect for those talks and this set of topics, and you're good for this and I'm great for that. So they're like literally picking at like their skill sets almost and what they fit better into, and then being like, okay, so you're the guy who's going to do that now, and I'm the guy who's going to do this, and that means you guys get to do this and you get to do that because you're good at this, but you're good at that. So there we go. Like, it seems like there's some sort of a weirdly well manicured system, like a well organized system that they have in place, where it's like there's a reason why each of them have a specific role to play and specific topics that they cover, and they will never touch the other ones because that's far too for insert other governing body member here. That's my suspicion. I don't know if that's true. Obviously, we can't confirm that, but I'm all but assured in myself and confident in myself that I'm right about that.
He's gone from stand-up mode to just barking and yelling mode. And again, all of this seems to be intended to keep Jehovah's Witnesses in this perpetual state of readiness and tension and urgency.
Fear.
What he's saying effectively is no matter what our teachings may have been in the past that might be still leading you to the assumption that the end is quite far off, we now have an explanation that makes all of these things current. We're just making a few tweaks here and there so that the book of Revelation is talking about now rather than the events of the 20th century, which is essentially what the Revelation climax, the now obsolete Revelation climax book, was all about. This new light is entirely focused on ramping up the doomsday rhetoric and keeping Jehovah's Witnesses in a constant state of readiness for the end.